We are continuing on the life of Moses. It's our Moses series. Moses walked the earth in around 1400 BC. He is one of the most important figures in all of the Bible, especially the Old Testament. And God uses Moses to do three things: to deliver the Israelites out of slavery, to establish Israel as a nation, and lead them to the promised land. And whenever we read our Bibles, we always want to make sure that we are reading our Bibles the primary reason is not a self-help book. The primary reason is we want to understand who God is. We want to learn about God, His character, His will, His ways, and we want to read the Bible to get to know God. Then the Bible can be a self-help book, but it's got to be primarily a way to learn about God. And so we read about through the life of and ministry of Moses because we want to learn about who God is and what He's like. And we also want to learn from Moses' own walk with God, and how we can apply it to our lives. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we covered the ninth commandment: you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And this week, the final commandment, it's been a long time. 10th commandment. Exodus 20:17 in the ESV says this about the 10th commandment. God says that you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. So basically, God gives us some examples. Hey, don't covet your neighbor's house. Don't covet your neighbor's spouse. Basically, and then God says, don't covet anything that is your neighbor's. So all of these are examples, not, I can only not covet these things. No, we can't covet anything that belongs to our neighbor. Okay, so what does the word covet mean? Why don't we start today with that? Let's define coveting. The Baker Illustrated Bible Dictionary says this about what coveting means. It says, to covet means to harbor an excessive desire. I appreciate that they put that word excessive. It's an excessive, it's not just like this one, like, oh man, it'd be really great to have a house like that. It's this excessive desire for something belonging to someone else. And I want to highlight that word desire, because really coveting is sinful desires. It has to do with the realm of desire. So they say to covet means to harbor an excessive desire for something belonging to someone else, often with the intent to take what rightfully belongs to that person. Now they continue on in their definition, and they say that coveting, it says, stands apart from other commandments because it targets an inward attitude rather than an outward act. Isn't that interesting? It's the only commandment that targets an inward attitude rather than an outward act. I remember hearing, it was the Bible Show or Under the Hood, whichever podcast they do. They do great work. I did glean some stuff off of them. But one thing that they had mentioned in their podcast, and I thought this was really interesting, is you have to imagine when God was giving Israel the 10 commandments, he was entrusting the nation of Israel to abide by these 10 commandments. And he was expecting the leadership of Israel to enforce these commandments. It's very easy to enforce murder, adultery, theft. Very hard to enforce coveting because you can't see it. It's hidden. It's in your heart. It's a desire. But nonetheless, it's still important. So with the 10th commandment, God is targeting basically wrong desires. Now, I want us to understand something. If left unchecked, coveting, wrong desires, if left unchecked, it will lead to other sins. Coveting is a gateway sin to many other sins. So think of coveting as wrong desires left unchecked, and wrong desires that if you feed and allow to develop in your heart will grow into other sins. So just a quick point or maybe a quick tip on you might be coveting if perhaps you believe you deserve something. Or perhaps you believe that you're owed something or you're jealous of someone. You might be coveting in those areas. You look at someone getting that promotion and saying, I deserve that. I should have gotten that promotion. That's coveting. I deserve that, right? I can't remember the exact quote, But the quote goes along the lines of something like, a person that struggles with coveting always thinks that they are doing more than what God is doing for them. God, I've done everything on my end of the bargain. Where's this thing? This person may be struggling with the area of coveting. Can I just say something? We should never have a heart. We should be careful to never have a heart of saying, God, you're not performing for me. You're not pulling up your end of the bargain. He's done more than enough, friends, just by the work of the cross. So you might be coveting if you believe you deserve something, or you believe you're owed something, or you're jealous of someone. Man, have you ever have that person that's in your life that you just kind of track, you just kind of follow their success? I mean, it's just they got another promotion. Oh, they got that car. Oh, they got that house. And you just look at all their stuff and you kind of compare their success in their life with yours. And like, man, you are entertaining a covetous heart. You have to be careful. So coveting is hidden in the heart, but it leads to other sins. Look at what James says. James chapter 1, verses 13 to 15. James says, let no one say that he is tempted. I added this in because I think this is important commentary. Let no one say that he is tempted. Let no one say when he is tempted, I'm being tempted by God. For God cannot tempt with evil, and he himself tempts no one. Okay, so I added verse 13 because I think this is important for us to recognize that God never tempts. God will never tempt you. God will, because temptation has to do with evil, and there's no evil within God. He says God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. Now, verse 14, here's the meat of the verses. James goes on, and he says, but each person is tempted when he's lured and enticed by his own desire. There's that word desire again. So we got from that Bible dictionary, coveting really is excessive desires, or I would say unhealthy or sinful desires. James is bringing that up for us today. He's saying a person's tempted when he's lured and enticed by his own desire. And then he talks about what happens with this desire. Verse 15, then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it's fully grown, brings forth death. I want to talk about something that James mentions. He says, desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin. Sinful desires, coveting, it will conceive. But then it'll give birth to sin. You notice the imagery that James chooses to use here? He uses conception and birth as his imagery, connecting desire, conceiving, and giving birth to sin. So there's a time limit here between your desires, conceiving, and then giving birth to sin. If you look at it in the natural world, you're looking at 9 months. Now, sometimes your desires might conceive and it births sin pretty darn quick. Sometimes you might see something, you might covet something, and all of a sudden, boom, here comes the sin. But other times, coveting will start slow. And it will conceive, but it will start to grow roots. And it'll take some time, and then the sin is birthed. So sometimes you covet and then you sin, and it's kind of like just a little bit of time passes. But other times, the enemy will work on you over a period of time, and he'll play the long game on you. Slowly developing over months, maybe years. You know, I think about certain times in my own life when my own sinful desires conceived and gave birth to sin. You know, I think about in my college days when I made some choices that I'm not proud of. And this sinful desire would knock at my door at certain times. And I would start to dwell on whatever this sinful desire was. And I would go into a mental tailspin. Has ever anybody, I mean, don't raise your hands, but you get tempted, like sin knocks at the door of your heart, but when we let it in, it's like you go into this mental tailspin of like, now you're entertaining this sin. You're fantasizing about this sin. You're devising plans on how to commit this sin. And what time of day will I commit this sin? Where will I commit this sin? What's the fastest way I can get to this sin? And like you go into this mental tailspin. This is what happened to me. This is what happened to everybody, by the way. And I would go into this mental tailspin. You know, when temptation knocks on your door, when that desire knocks on your door and you open it, can I just tell you from experience, it's very hard to close that door. When you open the door, man, once you get into that tailspin, it's hard to get out of that tailspin. It's not impossible. But you know, it'd be a lot easier if we just never opened the door in the first place. I actually started to find victory in these sinful mental tailspins when I started to realize, I'm just not going to open the door at all. Right? You know, sometimes even curiosity will open that door and we'll get into this tailspin, and that curiosity will conceive and then finally give birth to sin. But I found so much victory, friends, when I started to just not open up the door. You know, Paul warns us of this by telling us to take every thought captive. This is actually what I was practicing. I was practicing when a sinful desire, a covetousness desire, whatever desire would knock at my door, and I started to learn, I'm just going to have to take that thought captive. I would take it, and I would give it to Jesus, and I wouldn't open that door. Once I actually started to really practice taking thoughts captive, I saw so much victory with my battle with sin. I'm not perfect. I still mess up. But I've seen much fruit in learning to take thoughts captive and just not even open the door. It's hard to close the door once you've opened that door. It's hard to get out of that tailspin once you start tailspinning. It's a lot easier to just not open up the door. Fight this thing from the other side of the door. It's way easier to fight this thing with a door in between you. I once heard Greg Laurie, great pastor, say this. He says, sometimes, I don't know what phrase he used, sin, temptation, whatever. It might have been fear. When fear, you can replace fear with any kind of temptation or sin. When it knocks at the door, he said, I just say, Jesus, would you answer that door for me? I'm not even going to get up and answer that door. What a beautiful analogy. So Paul warns us to take every thought captive, and when I took that seriously, I started to see victory after victory, and so can you. Learn, friends, become an expert at taking every thought captive. Notice Paul says every thought. He doesn't say bad thoughts. He says every thought, every bad, every good thought. We need to learn to surrender our entire way of thinking and our entire minds to Christ. Take every thought captive. It's almost like you're a customs checker. Things are coming across your border and you're checking bags and you're making sure before I let you into my country, I need to make sure that you're an okay person and the stuff that you have on you is okay. When you take thoughts captive, you are customs. You are a customs TSA guy, border patrol guy, and you're checking every thought. Is this okay? Do I want to let this take root in my mind and my heart? Yes. Okay, we're going to bring this over here. Nope. You're going to go to Jesus. I'm not dealing with those thoughts. You're learning to sift through every single thought. It can be exhausting sometimes. I'm going to just be real with you, taking every thought captive. But it's just like developing a muscle. It is not fun working out for the first time after a long time of not working out. But once you get into the flow of it and your muscles get back on track to where they used to be, now it's a lot better to maintain. So I want to encourage you, get good at taking thoughts captive, every thought captive. And it does get easier. So you can conquer coveting by taking every thought captive. Back to coveting. But you got to stop it at the door. This is something, can I just tell you, this is something that you will have to manage your entire life. Paul had to manage this. I have to manage this. You have to manage this. No matter how long you've been walking with the Lord, no matter how mature or brand new of a Christian you are, you will have to manage this. You will have to get good at this, and you will have to practice this for the rest of your life. No matter how mature you are, you must not fall asleep on this one, friends. Earlier this year, I went through a season of battling, sinful thoughts at my door. Sometimes you get thoughts and see, because you're where you should not be, right? You're where you should not be, and obviously you're going to start thinking sinful thoughts and entertaining sinful thoughts. But sometimes you just kind of get these simple thoughts that come out of left field and go, where did these come from, right? And this was a season that I was in, and it was just, you could call these attacks. Sometimes the thoughts are not even David, he found himself in a place where he should not have been. He should have been out in the field with the kings, with his men, as kings should have been. But sometimes you're in the right spot, you're doing everything right, but still sin knocks at the door and you're like, why am I even thinking this sin? So sometimes you're attacked, but you still have to manage and take every thought captive. So earlier this year, I went through a season where I started getting these thoughts. I'm like, I don't want to think this. I don't want I don't want to dwell on these thoughts. And so I had to take thoughts captive. So I honestly don't even think these were my own desires. I just think these were just temptations and attacks from the enemy. But where I responded, every time a thought would knock at my door, I would say, no, thank you. I want nothing to do with that. Actually, can I just walk you through practically of what it looks like for me in my mind when I take thoughts captive? Maybe a thought knocks at the door of my mind, and I go, sometimes I'll literally kind of what was that? That's not, I want nothing to do with that. So in my mind, I literally go, Jesus, I want nothing to do with that thought. Here it is. I'm going to give it to you. And I just turn that thought into a little prayer to the Lord. Lord, and I direct my prayer, Lord, I'm going to surrender this thought to you. I'm going to take that thought captive. You take that thought and you put chains on it. You put handcuffs on it. And then you deliver that thing to Jesus. And I do a mental exercise like that every time a sinful thought comes. That's not true. Not every time. Sometimes I kind of wake up I'm like, what am I doing? I can't be thinking about that stuff. And then I'll kind of break out of that, right? But I'll take that and I'll say, Jesus, take this thought from me. I want nothing to do with it. So I'll turn that thought into a prayer. Lord, I surrender it to you. Well, this season of when this stuff kept knocking at my door, it probably lasted for 2 weeks. And it was all day long. It was excessive. It was exhausting. And taking thoughts captive, especially when you're in the midst of a season of just attacks, it can be exhausting because it's all day, every day, you're taking thoughts captive. And I remember two things that brought me breakthrough in that season. I remember crying out to God one morning saying, God, I'm done with this. You need to stop this. I don't want to take these thoughts captive. I need to move forward and I need to stop, having these things knock at my door. I don't want this anymore. And I just remember turning this into an extended prayer towards God one morning with him. And I cried. I think I might have even cried some tears. I was like, Lord, I need help. I don't want this. I need you to deliver me from this attack. And I remember also confiding in a brother. I have a friend of mine who's also in ministry, similar age and stage of life, and so we'll confide with each other and we'll share stuff with each other. We'll pray for each other. We'll talk ministry with each other. And I remember just sharing this with him, and I remember seeing breakthrough after those two things: crying out to God and confiding in a brother. I think about when I confided in this other brother, I think about James 5:16. It says, therefore, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. Now, I wasn't confessing sin with him. I wasn't sinning. I was just getting battered by sin knocking at my door. However, look at what James says. He says, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. And so there's just power in confession. There's just power in confiding in a brother or in a sister and praying for one another. And I received healing from that season. God delivered me from that season. And honestly, it was probably one of the hardest seasons of taking my thoughts captive, just because it's okay, a week's passed, okay, 2 weeks passed, what is this? And then God delivered me. And it wasn't hard because I wanted to sin. It was just exhausting. right? Sometimes you really want to sin when that sin knocks at the door and you have to really take that thought captive. Other times it's just like, man, I got to take another thought, like leave me alone. I'm tired of taking thoughts captive, but we have to stay in the battle. We can't fall asleep. Friends, you can conquer coveting by taking every thought captive. And if you can conquer coveting, you can protect yourself from other sins down the road, downstream. So let's talk about that for a second. Everyone, can I just clarify? Here's another point for today. Everyone struggles with coveting. Everyone. This is not just a new believer struggle. This is an every believer struggle. Everyone struggles with coveting. Now, everyone might not covet, but everyone has coveting knocking at their door. So everyone has it knocking at their door. You might not have it active in your life, but you will at least be tempted by it. And I would see coveting is, I think, more serious than we realize. Let's consider the life of David, shall we? Who was David? He was the second king of Israel. He was a man after God's own heart. What did God do for him? Helped David defeat Goliath. God saved King David from Saul, who was the current king, also his father-in-law, leveraging the entire state of Israel to go after David and try and kill him. David had victory. David was delivered from many battles with God. Yet it was coveting that led David into his massive, major backslide of his life. It started with coveting. David's walking on the roof of his palace one day. It says that at the time when kings should be out for war, that's what the Bible, I'm paraphrasing, it says that David remained. David stayed at home. So, and all of Israel, like all the men were out in the field, and like David was chilling in his palace. So he was in a place where he should not have been. That's step number one. If you want to protect yourself from sin, from backsliding, from failure, don't be in places where you shouldn't be. Don't be in places where you shouldn't be. So David is where he shouldn't be. He's on the roof of his palace one day, hanging out and chilling when all of his men are fighting in the battle. And it says that he sees a woman from his rooftop. He sees a woman. And so he asks, hey, who is this woman? And one of his servants says, is that not Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah? So he finds out that she's his friend Uriah's wife. He wants her anyway. And so David sends for her. So what do we see here? We see David coveting after his neighbor's wife. Doesn't matter that it's Uriah. It's some other man's wife, but it makes it even worse that Uriah is actually one of David's mighty men, one of David's best soldiers, one of the soldiers that went with David through hardship and protected David. He was one of the mighty men, Uriah the Hittite. And so David doesn't care. He covets after his neighbor's wife, and he sends for her. So Bathsheba comes. Also, by the way, some people put blame on Bathsheba, but you have to understand that Bathsheba, the king is sending for her. It's kind of hard to say no to the king. So she's kind of put in a very, very bad place. So he sends for her. They have intimate relations. And so now do you see how coveting leads to adultery? So it starts with coveting after it should have stopped there. But he let coveting conceive and give birth to even more sin. And so he commits adultery with Bathsheba. David gets her pregnant. David, what's he do? He has an opportunity to confess, to make it right. Nope. He invites Uriah from the battle, brings him home, kind of just wines and dines him. Hey, go home and be with your wife. You know, you've been working hard. And Uriah is more honorable than David. Uriah sleeps outside on his porch and doesn't sleep inside his home, has no relations with his wife. God, in his mercy, it seems, gives David an opportunity. Okay, this isn't going to help. David, it's time to come forth. Time to come forward and come clean. So what's David do? He tries to get Uriah drunk. Hopes getting Uriah drunk's gonna switch things up. That doesn't work. So then David decides, I guess I'm going to have to murder the guy. And so he plots Uriah's murder. He writes a secret letter to his military commander, Joab. He instructs Joab to put Uriah at the place where the hardest fighting is taking place and all of a sudden draw back and leave Uriah alone so that he can die in the fight. He seals this letter, hands it to Uriah. He says, hey, will you give this to my commander Joab? Wow. So Joab does it. Joab kills Uriah. And so do you see how coveting leads to more sins downstream? Coveting, David, in David's situation, led to adultery and led to murder. And led to lying. He tried to cover it up. Coveting got David a man after God's own heart. Coveting is more serious than we realize. It got David. Paul struggled with coveting. Did you know that? That was one of the struggles that Paul had, was with coveting. Romans 7, verses 7 to 8 says this. What then shall we say? That the law is sin? By no means. Yet if it had not been for the law, I would not have known sin. For I would not have known what it is to covet if the law had not said, you shall not covet. But sin, so here's where it has to do with Paul now. Sin, seizing an opportunity through the commandment, produced in me, Paul speaking, produced in me all kinds of covetousness. Coveting got David. Coveting got Paul. Friends, we should take coveting seriously. The ultimate key to battling coveting, I think that one of the best keys that we can use to battling coveting is to look at the life of Zacchaeus. Look at the life of Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus struggled with coveting. We'll get to that in a moment. Let me just set the scene up. Zacchaeus. At this point in the gospel, Jesus has already fed the 5,000. He's cast out demons out of people. He's healed lepers. He opened the eyes of a blind. Jesus is drawing crowds wherever he goes. And word of Jesus reaches many cities, just like Jericho, where Zacchaeus lived. So it would probably have been something like this. Zacchaeus has heard conversation in the marketplace. He's heard conversation with maybe some of his friends. Have you heard about this Jesus guy? He was over here in Galilee one day, and 5,000 men, not even including the women and children, he took just a few fish and loaves of bread, and he multiplied it. I heard that Jesus casted out demons out of this one guy in the middle of a synagogue. Yeah, I heard that Jesus healed these 12 lepers. I heard that Jesus opened the eyes of the blind. And so that all of these stories are being shared. Man, and then the Pharisees, they don't like Jesus. And anytime the Pharisees try to trap Jesus, Jesus makes them look like fools. And you know what? Jesus preaches with authority. Anytime, so all of this is buzzing around the entire nation of Israel, and it's reached Zacchaeus' ears. This is why he tries to see Jesus when Jesus is passing through Jericho. He's heard of him. So Jesus is passing through, and there's this man named Zacchaeus. He's a chief tax collector. Tax collectors, not to belabor it, we've preached on this before, but I don't know who's watching online. Tax collectors were traitors. If you see a tax collector in the Bible, you need to automatically assume traitor. Because they were Jews who were working for the Roman government who was occupying Israel, taxing Israel. And so they would hire these Jews and say, okay, you're going to be our tax collectors. You know the community more than we do. And I want you to go and tax him, raise up some money for Rome. And these tax collectors had the Roman government backing them. They could bring soldiers if they want and rough up people if they weren't going to give money. You can think of them like crooked mobsters. And so these Jewish tax collectors would go in and tax the Jews. They would overtax them, give what Rome wanted, and pocket the rest. And so they would get rich off of the backs of their fellow man by stealing from them. So tax collectors were thieves, and they were traitors. No Jew, no good Jew liked a tax collector. In fact, they had this saying, sinners and tax collectors. So they would put tax collectors in their own category. They wouldn't even be rounded up with the rest of the sinners. No, they were worse. It was sinners and tax collectors. And this is who Zacchaeus was. Zacchaeus was the furthest out person that you can imagine. He was outcasted himself, stealing. But let me ask you something. Why? Why was he a tax collector? Because he coveted his neighbor's money. So Zacchaeus was someone that struggled with coveting. He was greedy after wealth, and he took his neighbor's property to enrich himself. It's coveting. So let's read. Now I've set the scene. Luke 19, verses 1 to 10. He, Jesus, entered Jericho and was passing through. Can I just a side note that I thought of? This is totally not a part of the sermon, but I just thought this was kind of interesting. If you look at the history of Jericho, Jericho was the first city that Joshua and his men conquered when they crossed the Jordan River. This was the first. So God calls them into the promised land. I want you to take it over by conquest. This is the first city that they conquer. And Joshua gives this decree, says, hey, listen, we're going to leave this city rebel on the ground. We're not going to rebuild. Almost like we're going to leave this as a monument, right? We're not going to rebuild this city here. We're going to leave the rebel here. Oh, and by the way, Joshua says if anybody builds on the rebel and rebuilds Jericho, they will be cursed. And so later down the line, some guy gets a wild idea. We're going to rebuild Jericho, and he falls under the curse. And one of his sons or multiple sons die. I forget. But Jesus is walking through this town that should have never been rebuilt. Isn't that interesting that Jesus is walking through a town looking for people in a town that he never wanted rebuilt? That's amazing that he meets sinners where they're at. This is who our God is. He's walking through a town that should have never been rebuilt according to his instructions. And he's still going to that town and meeting sinners like Zacchaeus and saving sinners like Zacchaeus. Okay, so it says that he enters Jericho, Jesus, and was passing through, and behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector. So we talked about tax collectors, but it says that Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector, meaning he was the tax collector of all the other tax collectors. He was the chief. He was the head honcho. So that just makes things worse for him. That just puts him in even deeper into that category of tax collectors. He's the tax collector of tax collectors. It says that he was a chief tax collector and was rich. How did he get that money? From the backs of his fellow neighbors. Verse 3, and he was seeking to see who Jesus was. So notice Zacchaeus is like, I want to lay eyes on this guy. I want to see Jesus. I want to hear about him because he's probably already heard about Jesus. So he's like, what's all this commotion? Okay, Jesus is in town. I want to see him. But on account of the crowd, he could not because he was small in stature. So he was short. But notice it says on account of the crowd. No one is like I would imagine they're boxing Zacchaeus out. Like, you're not seeing him, traitor, right? And so Zacchaeus is not able to maneuver the crowd. He's short. People hate him. It's not a good scene for him. So watch what it says. It says he ran ahead, climbed up a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. Here's what's interesting. You need to understand something about Middle Eastern culture and wealth. If you're wealthy and if you see a wealthy man run, that is not normal. When you're seeing Zacchaeus run and climb up a tree, he's doing something that he has servants to do for him. I'm not running. You have to let yourself be a little shocked when you see Zacchaeus running because it shows the desperation. It's the same thing with the father who has the prodigal son. And it says that the father runs to him. The father should not be running. He's a wealthy, well-to-do father. He's got servants to run for him. The fact that the father is running remember, this is shame and honor culture. He's embarrassing himself. These wealthy people, they're not embarrassing themselves by running, yet it shows the desperation in Zacchaeus to get a hold of Jesus and see Jesus. So that's something that I want to point out. That the fact that he's running and climbing a tree, that's not normal, and that shows insight into his desperation. It's pretty cool. Maybe you have a history of having an encounter with Jesus. Can I just tell you, one of the quickest ways to have an encounter with Jesus is desperation. Remember the blind man? I think it's even in this story. He's at least, I think, passing through Jericho. And he says, Son of David, have mercy on me. And they're like, shh, come on, be quiet. And what does he do? He yells all the louder, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus says, come here, what do you want? And this guy was desperate. I'm telling you, there is something there in desperation. When like get desperate with God. Maybe you're in a season of sin. Maybe you're in a season of just dryness. Press the gas pedal of desperation. Lean into desperation. Embarrass yourself before the Lord. You don't have to embarrass yourself here, but you could just get getting desperate with God. That's okay, and it actually produces fruit. So it's okay to get desperate. God's heart moves when he sees people get desperate for him. So it says that he climbed up a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. And then Jesus came to that place. He looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. I love to imagine this scene. It says that he came to the place where Zacchaeus was, and he looked up. Can you imagine being Zacchaeus up in this tree? Like, I'm not trying to embarrass. What am I? If I'm Zacchaeus, I'm just trying to get a look at him. I'm okay to look at him from the tree. I'm just trying to maintain distance. I don't want other people to know I'm like hidden up in the tree. And Jesus probably stops right underneath Zacchaeus. I like to imagine Zacchaeus in that moment, his heart just sinks. And then Jesus looks up and addresses Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So what did Jesus do in this moment? He invited himself over to a sinner's house, a chief tax collector, the sinner of sinners. This is one of the furthest out people. Imagine one of the furthest out people today in our culture, and Jesus stops at that person where they're at, looks up to them and says, I want to come to your house today. This is shocking to Zacchaeus, and it's shocking to the people. Because you'll see later, did they talk about that? Yeah, I'll read that. So Jesus invites himself to a sinner's house. I don't know, maybe you're caught up in sin. Jesus invites himself over to your house too. Even now, would you let Jesus in? I want to say that's the best thing I don't know what sin you might be walking through. The best thing that you could ever do is invite Jesus into your home to deal with that sin. So Jesus invites himself over to your house too, even now. And let's look at Zacchaeus' reaction. We don't know how much time has passed. So it says, so he hurried, he came down and received him joyfully. So Zacchaeus is just like blown away. He's excited. He's having Jesus over at his house. He receives him joyfully. And if you're receiving Jesus, you're receiving Jesus' party. So he's hosting probably a decent group of people. And when they saw it, who's they? The people. When they saw Jesus invite himself over to Zacchaeus' house, it says what? They all grumbled. He has gone to be a guest? The guest of a man who is a sinner. And Zacchaeus, so now Jesus and his friends are over at Zacchaeus' house. We have no idea how much time has passed, but they're sitting down. And it says that Zacchaeus stood up. Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I have defrauded, that just means steal. If I have stolen anything, defrauded anyone of anything, stolen from anybody, I restore it fourfold. What happens? Zacchaeus, remember, we need to understand the point. We're teaching on the 10th commandment on not coveting, right? Zacchaeus was, you could argue, a chief coveter. Right? Chief tax collector. He got wealthy off of the backs of his neighbor's resources. And Zacchaeus has an audience with Jesus, and he's absolutely transformed. Overwhelmed and transformed by this encounter with Jesus. And watch, on the spot, Zacchaeus gives half his money away to the poor. Immediately. Can you imagine giving half of your money away to the poor? Just in an instant? Your entire net worth. Half of everything that I am. I'm just automatically giving to the poor. Then it says what he does with the leftover half. He gives, he's going to find every person that he's stolen from, and he's not only going to pay him back, he's going to pay him back times 4 from that other half. You might even argue, I'm not going to say that. But Zacchaeus takes the other half of his wealth and he makes right with the people that he stole from. Side note, have you ever stolen anything? I want to encourage you, make it right. Just like we saw Zacchaeus make it right. So, Zacchaeus makes this huge declaration. Lord, I'm giving half my money to the poor, and I'm going to pay back anybody that I've stolen from 4 times. Watch what Jesus says. Jesus said to him, verse 9, today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Oh, this is who Jesus is. He has come to seek and save the lost. I don't know, maybe in your own walk, there is an area of your life where you're lost. Maybe you're entertaining sin like you shouldn't. Can I just tell you, Jesus is out looking for you. He wants to save you. Let him in. So, back to Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus, you could argue, was a coveter of coveters, a chief coveter. And how did Zacchaeus deal with his own problem with coveting? He found someone of far greater value than the things he was coveting after. Friends, Jesus, can I just tell you, Jesus is so much more valuable than anything you could ever covet. If you struggle with coveting of any kind, here's the secret. Get your attention on to Jesus. Get your attention onto Jesus. Man, if you've been tracking that person for many, many years, and oh, they got married before I did. Oh, they got that house. They got that career. I deserve that house. I deserve that career, right? And you're just like comparing and coveting. And can I just tell you, when you feel your heart start to entertain coveting, when you feel coveting knocking at your door, get your eyes on Jesus. Just go. I remember hearing a guy, he's a former mobster, former Italian mafia guy. And he shared, what was his ministry name? He spoke at my old church. Sam Betts might know him. But I remember him talking about, like, you coming out of an Italian mafia lifestyle, like you got some things to work through, okay? And so he would say that when temptation would knock at his door, he would just go into a little mini worship service. He would just start worshiping Jesus. Jesus, I love you. Jesus, help me. And the stuff would lift. I'm telling you, the way through coveting is to replace whatever you see of value in that thing that you're coveting after and recognize the greater value in Jesus. So get your eyes off of that stuff and get your eyes on Jesus. Go into a little mini worship service yourself. Let Jesus into your house like Zacchaeus did, and let him transform your heart and your life. Also, if you call yourself a follower of Jesus, you should look like a follower of Jesus. We cannot just give lip service and say, yep, I'm a Christian. But does your life look like it? I'm not saying earn your way into heaven. That's impossible. But we should have fruit. There should be fruit. If you stand yourself up next to your neighbor, next to your coworkers, people should know that you're a believer. So maybe you're a believer in name only, but I want you to be public with your belief. I want to encourage you. People need to know that you're a follower of Jesus. You don't need to be on a street corner with a mic. You don't need to be, Bible thumping and shoving Bibles down people's throats. But you do need to be salt and light. And you do need to be mentioning Jesus at your work and with your friendships, offering to pray for them, serving them, loving them. Zacchaeus had an encounter with Jesus and it changed him. If you have had an encounter with Jesus, if you have called Jesus your Lord and Savior, you should not look like you used to. At the very least, you should be starting to transform and look less and less and less like you used to, and more and more like Jesus. And friends, that's a lifelong process. That's not an over-the-night thing. But I must encourage you We see complete transformation. We see a clear transformation with Zacchaeus. Well, also, what did Zacchaeus do? He laid his old lifestyle of sin down. So if he is giving half his money to the poor, and if he is righting all of the wrongs that he's stolen from people, he's not stealing anymore. He's not living that lifestyle anymore. So there might be something in our own walks, in our own lives, where we need to lay down and pursue Christ. I want to give an opportunity for everybody here. This is not an altar call. This is going to be an opportunity to respond to any form of coveting that you have in your own life. If you want help with any form of coveting, it could be as little as wanting someone's job, which that's not a little thing. I don't want to belittle that. Wanting someone's house, wanting someone's spouse, wanting someone's family life, right? But if the Holy Spirit is marking your heart right now and saying, this, you have an issue of coveting with this or with that, whatever it is. And if you want help with that, I want to give you an opportunity to respond and to get your eyes on Jesus. So if we all could respect everyone, can we all bow our heads and close our eyes? Again, this isn't an altar call. This is just you raising. Actually, I'm not even going to have people raise hands. This is just you. I want you to have a moment with God right now. I want you to tell him and confess to him, Lord, this is what I think I'm struggling. I think I'm struggling. I know I'm struggling with coveting. Lord, here it is. I want you to lay this before the Lord right now in prayer. And I want you to ask him to help you with it. God, help me. God, help me look at you. God, deliver me from this coveting. God, help me take every thought captive. That's a big one. Talk to him about that. But I just want to give us a few moments to just lay any area of covetousness before the Lord and have him deal with it. Can I just encourage you? Some of us may be struggling with pride. Push your pride aside. Get right with the Lord. Tell Jesus that you want him to be the prize and nothing else. God is our reward. Give us a few more moments. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and conclude our sermon today, and I will pray us out. I want to just thank everybody online for joining us today or watching us later on. Let me pray for us.